Judges chapter 14 verses 5 through 6, it says, Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah. And they came to the vineyards of Timnah, and behold, a young lion came toward him, roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Here we can see that something happened to Samson when the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. It doesn't say the soul of the Lord rushed upon him. It says the Spirit. And when the Spirit came upon Samson, an infusion of strength happened. He received supernatural strength to the point that he was able to kill a lion with his bare hands. A lion that got in his way did not survive this infusion of strength that the Spirit put into Samson. So that's one characteristic we can see regarding the Spirit. When it comes upon you, it gives you an infusion of strength, of supernatural strength. And the same principle can be seen in, later on in this chapter in verse 19 when it says, And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 men of the town, and took their spoil and gave the garments to those who had told the riddle. In hot anger he went back to his father's house. So again, when the Spirit rushed upon Samson, he received an infusion of strength, and anything that got in his way was overthrown, was defeated. He was able to overcome any obstacle that got in his way when the Spirit rushed upon him, not the soul, but the Spirit of the Lord. Now we can go to Matthew 26, verse 41, where we will see this same principle of strength associated with the Spirit. It's a very well-known passage, Matthew 26, verse 41. We'll go to it quickly. It says, this is where Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he was about to be arrested. And he says, let's go to verse 40 first. It says, And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, So could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. Notice again, it doesn't say the soul is willing. Oh, your soul is so desirous of doing God's will. No, it says the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Therefore, this establishes a connection between a will that cannot be broken and walking in the Spirit. When you walk in the Spirit, you get connected to a will that has an inherent strength to it, so much so that it can overcome any obstacle that gets in its way, humanly speaking. So let's go now to Romans chapter 8, verses 26 through 27. This is another well-known passage, and we'll see what the Lord has to say here. It says, Likewise the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he who searches hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. Here we can see two subpoints, two little principles that tie in with the principle of strength. And number one, it says, the Spirit helps us in our weaknesses. That means that the Spirit comes with strength, because if it comes to help us in our weaknesses, it means that it comes to overcome the deficiency of those weaknesses, which by definition would be a lack of strength. So the Spirit gives us an infusion of strength. And also it says the Spirit intercedes according to the will of God. In other words, the Spirit is tied up to the will of God. There's a direct connection between the Spirit component and the Spirit of God and His will. So when we're walking in the Spirit, something happens, and we are allowed to have this infusion of undeniable will from God. It's as if God's will becomes manifested through us, and we can begin to forge a transformation of everything around us, and nothing is able to get in our way because of this infusion of strength that comes from the Spirit. So the Spirit gives us this infusion. And to finish this point, we have to go to Psalm 51, verse 12. This is a famous psalm. It's the psalm that David spoke to the Lord after he had fallen, when he was asking for forgiveness, for repentance. He was speaking with a heart of repentance, seeking restoration from God. Psalm 51 verse 12. We'll go to it quickly, and we'll see how the Spirit once again gives us strength. Is related to the concept of strength. Here it says, "Restore to me the joy of your salvation and uphold me with a willing spirit." Notice that it doesn't say uphold me with a willing soul. It says a willing spirit. When you walk in the Spirit, you get an infusion of strength, and your will becomes a will of steel. It cannot be broken. It cannot be overcome, and you become a conqueror who defeats any obstacle that gets in the way that God has sent you to walk in. So far we have established two characteristics. Number one, the soul harbors life, whereas the Spirit can spawn life. And number two, the Spirit, when it comes upon you, gives you an infusion of strength. You develop an unbreakable will, a will that can conquer the things around it and overcome obstacles thrown at you by the enemy.